Okay, we will get going with our fifth topic here, enrollment management and marketing. Okay, in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, amen. Just ask the Holy Spirit to look down upon us during this Easter season, really guide and direct our conversations so that it may be fruitful and so that we may better understand your will for us in our own specific schools. As we say, come, Holy Spirit, fill the hearts of thy faithful and enkindle in them the fire of thy love. Send forth thy Spirit, and they shall be created, and thou shalt renew the face of the earth. Let us pray. O God, who by the light of the Holy Spirit instructed the hearts of thy faithful, grant us in that same Spirit to savor what is right and to ever rejoice in his consolation. Through the same Christ our Lord. Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Okay, so this is a very nuts and bolts conversation today in terms of we're attaching some truth, beauty, and goodness to the discussion, but this is very much like, in many ways, a very practical conversation. So, and it's built out. I met with my enrollment guy, and he gave me some components of things that he's tried to dispel at Chris Curry, and he's presented with the ICLE conference a couple times talking about this. So some of these are his own findings. Many of them are my own from working at a few different schools, and then as well talking with other headmasters. So there's not a whole lot of quotes here from professionals in the field. It's just kind of things taken from the toolbox, so to speak. So we're going to be talking in particular as regards to start out 5 myths associated to marketing classical schools. So we'll just go through these. So the first one, taken from Field of Dreams. If you recall the Kevin Costner film from, I think it was late 80s, early 90s, if you build it, they will come. So just the notion of having a classical school, a Catholic classical school, does not ensure or guarantee your enrollment's going to follow, right? Just attaching the name to who you are is nice. It's quite good, but there's a lot of things associated with that. And so what comes behind it? So that's our first myth, that just having the space, having the name added to your model will not be bulletproof. Myth number 2, classical education is not a marketable product. So some people may believe that, well, who on earth would want that? Who on earth is interested in that? What are you going to have to do to compromise to make it marketable? And you can see the portrait here holding the iPad of a young child. This must be the only way to market it, right? But this is a myth, because something that is good, true, and beautiful sells itself on its own. And it's not about being a niche school or carving out some narrow focused lens, but classical education as a whole is enough to build around your marketing plan, so long as you can deliver on it, right? And I would say that of any model. Like you can sell something as much as you want, but you actually have to, the proof needs to be in the pudding, so to speak, when they come to your school. It can't just be, the bait and switch. Okay, number 3, catering to the consumer subverts the mission. So if you're trying to just build everything around the people that are in your vicinity, you'll lose your identity of who you are. And there's a certain element of this that can be true, and there's a certain element that's off. And we'll talk about this actually knowing the consumer in your area and trying to introduce and present your mission in the best possible way so that they know that they desire it. Sometimes they don't even know what they don't know, right? So it's the notion of matching those two things together, and not necessarily changing your mission to the people that are in your community, but giving them that knowledge, the background, and the understanding so that they can thrive based on your mission. Number 4, we will succeed when we can show that we have everything the other schools have. So measuring yourself to your peers to the point where everything that you are doing is measurable apples to apples with all of your peers, which is not necessarily really our aim and our focus and our goal, right? If you're trying to have the latest and greatest technology or gym or campus or all of these things, that's fine. But eventually, like when you peel the onion back enough layers, like what's on the inside, and that's really what you want to focus on, and be less concerned with the kind of the objective, quantifiable measurements of your neighboring schools. That's fine, but they may have a completely different mission. They may have a totally different focus, totally different outcome that's completely, might even be the opposite of yours. We have a local elementary school here that's a public charter school called College Park Academy. It's a spinoff of the local state university, University of Maryland. And they marketed themselves really well in the local vicinity and got the word out. And then they had a lottery and they got a lot of buzz and a lot of people got on board. Their model is completely different from ours. So while they found great success in marketing, we would never try and match kind of their maneuvers, because they have a one-to-one program and they have tutors that stand in the room, and a fair amount of the classes are taught virtually online. So the kids are in school, and this school's been open for like 7 years. So they were well ahead of the COVID curve in terms of trying to do this. But the kids take a device to school. They're, a portion of their classes are taught live, another portion are taught off-site. And then some of them, especially older students, are just in a large room sitting at desks and chairs, and tutors are kind of like circling the room and field questions as they go. So their model is the opposite of what we're trying to do in so many ways. So while their marketing stance seems effective, we're not going to try and copy anything that they're doing, because it's the opposite of what we're doing. Okay, so number 5, downplaying what's unpopular today. So, and just kind of, brushing it to the side or even under the rug. But I would say this, in the sense of, so long as you know the development of the child and you can speak to that, those are the things that may change in today's world that you need to be aware of. And so long as you have an answer for meeting the needs of the development of the child in today's market. So, you don't need to be standing out in front with a banner and claiming that technology is the source of all evil in the world. Like, that's not going to win you a whole lot of families to your school. But do you need to have an understanding of why maybe your school is downplaying technology? Yeah, and you need to know the principles behind it, some of the educational philosophy on why that's tied into what you're doing. You need to have answers, but you can't go around like banging a drum, because the parents of potential families are going to ask all kinds of questions, and you have to know the answer why to all of them, right? It's not to say that you're not going to use these in marketing, but you don't want to lead with them. More importantly, you need to know how to answer their question of why are you doing X over Y. Why do you send your students to field trips here as opposed to there? Why do you select these books over those, right? It needs to all be interconnected. And so, so it lines up really well. I was talking with someone here in the class this morning about the notion of, how do you balance teaching current events in American history or not at all, and how that plays out. And so you need to have a stance as a school, because if you are teaching current events, you need to have an answer for how that works and what that looks like, and who's owning control of the content surrounding that, or is it just fueled by passion, by whatever happened yesterday, right? So as a school, you need to figure those things out. Here at our school, we decided to not teach current events, and we said there's plenty of things that you need to know in history that are leading up to today's current events. And if without a rich, deep understanding of those things, today's current events will just be, you would just be riding the wave of whatever shows up on the news, or whatever seems flashy, or whatever mob rule has in play in today's world. So just knowing your answer to why. Okay, number 6, effective marketing is expensive. Not necessarily. Some folks believe that you get what you pay for, and there's some value in that. Marketing is different because it depends on how you value, on what the consumer values about something. So some people, well, I'll use an example. My daughter was selecting colleges this past year, and she was admitted to a couple places. And she has a very visual sense of things. She loves graphic design. She loves colors, fonts. She's constantly commenting about all these things. And she was immediately like comparing and contrasting the school's colors and their website and the logo and their branding and all this stuff. And I said to her, and she was really focused on that in a healthy sense. She was measuring it all and seeing what's the most appealing to the eye, and what do you want to be surrounded by, and what mood does that put you in, and how does that force you to think more clearly, and all these things. And I, just being a dad, said, throw all that garbage to the side. Just put it down. You're going to study. And when you study, the books that they select and the professors could care less about any of that stuff, right? And so somebody has put some money into that because it should and can be very appealing. But that's just an entry point for your understanding to the school. That is not the school. That is not why the school exists. They don't exist to develop marketing. So whereas other consumers do, but I think, the notion of a brand like Coke, for instance, here is totally different from the notion of education. We're trying to build a relationship that lasts for eons, and where they're being formed and shaped, right? There's a certain amount of Coke's decisions that are based on the bottom line. How much did we sell this week? How much did we sell this month? And they do not care necessarily about the relationship the same way that we do, right? So you put your dollars where it matters. So when we say this, a lot of it will come in quality control around the message, and that's actually not very expensive. You have to keep an eye on it. We're going to talk about that today. But it's not going to drain all of your resources to try and manage the school, the community relations that exist out there in the local community, and what that looks like. So you can spend lots of money, but I've actually seen that even when you think you're spending lots of money, there's way much more money that you could be spending. And oftentimes when you spend a great deal, you're undersold. I think I have already told you guys, our own diocese, they spent close to $500,000 about 3 years ago on a marketing plan for the diocese at large. And they went for the largest marketing firm in the country that works with businesses. And they went there, they met with them numerous times. They came and spoke to various principals and these subcommittees and different things. And after about 6 to 9 months worth of work, they came up with a new logo, and they came up with a new website, and they passed out these fleece pullovers to the administrators that had the new logo on it. And then they had one poster that was in English and Spanish on the same thing, and they said, hang this up in your buildings. I can't say it's garnished one single applicant for our school from any of that. And my enrollment guy, who was in marketing for about 20 years before he even started working at our school, said, this is what happens. You go for the highest top value of a marketing name that's known out there, and you give them your product. And it's really actually, you're just getting the bottom base level service for what you can pay. And they put their most junior members on your project, and they just come up with something that's new to you, and that's it. But they don't really understand your product. They don't really try and get to know what you're really actually trying to provide, whether that's a product you're selling or something, a service that you provide. And so they miss the mark. So we'll talk about branding as well. Okay, so I wanted to start here before getting into some of the nuts and bolts about some things that I wouldn't consider less effective. And I'm saying this because I've tried these things, or other schools that I've worked at in the past, we've had them. So the first thing is touch a truck. I don't know if you've heard about this concept, but it's popular around this area. Schools will have fire trucks, ambulances, rescue cars, race cars, monster trucks, and they bring them to the school on one day, and they promote in the local community, and they're just trying to get people with young children to the school. right? So it's like hanging a carrot out, showing a shiny apple to people, trying to get them to bite on something that exists there. The problem is that thing that you're showing them has no association to your school. It has zero, right? So it's the equivalent to saying free car washes, to saying free apple pie, right? Like those things are fine and good in and of themselves, but what do they have anything to do with your culture, with your school? We tried this at another school that I worked at. We had a full-time admissions person, and she was adamant this was going to work. And we did like 4 or 5 of them, and I think we got 2 applications for a school that had like the enrollment was burning and tanking fast. Did we get some cool trucks to show up? Sure, but it becomes like disingenuous, and it comes bait and switch, and people can see that and they can read through it. So just less effective. I've seen some schools that literally offer one open house in an entire school year and just say, we have one open house. It's on a Sunday after this mass for 2 hours, and that's our window of opportunity for people to come through the school. And so if you're in that boat, I would say to shatter the glass on that notion. One of anything is never going to give you the numbers that you need to kind of build interest. It's a start, but it's certainly a long ways off. And also I would say to respect people's Sundays and come up with a wide variety of options. So do evening events, do morning events, do Saturday events if you have to. You need to figure out like the demographics that you're trying to serve and what appeals to them, and then offer a splash of variety. Not everyone has stay-at-home moms. Not everyone has only working 2-parent double income families, right? So meet the needs of both of those, okay? Another huge piece is signage around the school that offers open enrollment. I think most schools have this. But I also think most people know that if you're interested in the school, you should just call the school and find out more information, right? The sign, to me, the sign out front is as ineffective as a fundraising thermometer that's less than 50% full, right? Don't even put up the thermometer until you have 50% of your funds. Like, give people a goal to shoot for. So, the sign is really unnecessary in many ways, in my mind. Maybe there's something else that you can attract them with, but just the notion of taking applications, apply within, is really not going to move the needle for most families. And if they're looking at your school, it's probably unlikely from that. Having all your money and resources in an online presence. So some schools have beautiful, beautiful websites. And I will say you can paint a gorgeous picture online. And that is one amazing way to help sell your school. And I would never downplay that. If you have those resources, if you have somebody that can underwrite your website, if you have a parent that can manage it and keep it up to date and beautiful and fresh, then terrific, do it. I would just caution you from using every single penny that you have in your budget line item for marketing to only have it there. It's going to be, you need to see it as a boomerang or a launching pad for everything else that you're doing. If somebody goes to their website and gets every single thing they need from you about your school, then you've almost given them too much. You need to use it as like a hook that it leads them to ask way more questions and they want to get more information. It shouldn't be that, somebody in Australia can look at your website at 2 a.m. and know every single piece of the universe about your school and apply after 4 hours of reading everything, right? You want to have some sort of human experience with them in the process. It shouldn't be that simple. Okay, paid advertising and paid marketing plans. I kind of mentioned the paid marketing plans earlier. Paid advertising can go a lot of different ways. If it's not targeted specifically at your direct demographic of who you're trying to serve, then it's really like throwing money to the wind. A neighboring school, I was just talking with my pastor yesterday about this, and he was saying that the school up the street, they're looking to spend $30,000 this spring in the next month on marketing. And he said, if they get 5 students over the next, 3 years, then it will have paid for that themselves. And I said, but they need way more than 5 students to help grow the school. That's not really going to solve their problem. He said, I know that, and you know that, but they seem to think this is going to, it's going to work. And they just want to be able to say, we threw some money into this department and we did it. But, your money's precious, right? Time is valuable. Don't just throw it at a particular direction. We pay one fee for the whole year, and I'm just saying what we do. You might have some better options out there. We pay a $75 fee through Facebook to advertise our school in a very, very timely fashion, leading up to our open house schedule to begin. So it really just kicks up enough dust to let people see, oh, the open houses are about to start. Now you can start coming into the school. So it's timed, it's targeted, and it's leading them to something more, something better than they'll get just online. So if you have something like that to use as leverage to take them to the next level, then I would say it's probably, definitely worth your time to go in that direction. Okay, so let's talk about some strategy and tactics and what could work here. So enrollment, it has to be an integral part of your strategy for your school. I'm talking mission, vision. Your enrollment person has to bleed the mission and the vision of the school. They have to be able to know, and whether it's you or whether it's the secretary or the vice principal or a lead teacher or a parent, I would really argue, it doesn't matter who the person is. It doesn't matter. They have to be able to bleed it with their eyes and ears. They need to be able to talk upside down about it with their eyes closed and really own it. And then the strategy component is they also have to know some of the dollars and cents of what's going on and what's at stake. So my enrollment guy, I tell him what's going on with the budget. He doesn't sit in on the budget meetings, but I let him know like where we stand with tuition. This fundraiser brought in this much. These people are donating to this scholarship. We're really hurting in this area. So he has a sense of like what he's doing is directly tied to the budget, in the sense of the more families that we get through the school, the better off we are, because our tuition feeds the vast majority of our budget, right? It's feeding somewhere between 80 and 90% of everything that we do. So they need to know. They need to be a part of the process. They can't just be on an island and be like, well, get some new families here, right? They need more skin in the game. So the marketing plan should provide necessary tools and resources, okay? It can't just be an idea. It can't just be some numbers thrown down. You need to have like pieces of the puzzle in play. So if your marketing person is not there, do you have a packet? Do you have a tool? Do you have a process to take them through? Is the process known? Does your receptionist know every single step in the process? If someone comes to the door and they are not an English speaker, how do you work with them, right? Like the tools and the steps to kind of go through needs to be explained, mapped out, and there need to be multiple people that can take you through, not just a one-off. And it needs to be shared. It should be everyone's job. Administrators, teachers, enrolled families, everyone in between. I really think the best marketing angle is your existing families, because if they're having a good experience, they're going to talk on the sideline at the soccer game, and they're not going to gossip about Mrs. So-and-so and how she assigns too much homework and how this and how that. They're going to do the best talking for you, that you won't have to do a whole lot of hard sells. It'll be sold on its own. Now, the danger there is then you get into like the business of trying to keep everybody happy, and that's not the role of a school either. You're going to have some disgruntled parents at the same time. So when you do have that, what else is kind of in your portfolio of bringing everybody up to speed? Your staff, having community events where there's people in the community that actually respect your school, and they get it and they understand it. And if it's brought up one time, is it brought up in a positive light, positive experience, positive connotation, or how is your school perceived beyond your campus, right? And then, coupled with that, the last point here is retention. Like, what's your retention strategy? What are you doing? What are you building? What's the branding, the messaging that you're selling to the current families that keeps them coming back and wanting more. There needs to be a thirst on their end, in a sense. And if you're not leading into something more, if there's nothing to look forward to, if there's no strategy for, oh, it gets better the next time you go through this, you actually go into greater depth on these 4 areas. When they get to 5th grade, oh man, they're going to memorize these 7 poems, these 9 speeches. You just wait, right? There, and if that's known, and if you can market those things and talk about them, um, and do simple things that speak, like save things for later. Like, our band doesn't start until 4th or 5th grade, depending on what instrument you want to play. But there's kids in the primary grades, they watch the band perform multiple times a year. So when they get to that point, they're like thirsting for it. They want to be a part of it, right? Same thing with our choir. We have a beginner and intermediate and advanced level of choir. We have like over 70 kids in the choir. And the kids are looking forward to that, to like graduating through. Parents also see things. When we have an awards assembly at school, every other class, they take turns. Every other class has to present something to the parents. So they see. So it's like it's a presentation of sorts, a presentation of what they've learned. There's a little bit of marketing built in there too, because it's like, look at the 7th grade and how they just memorized, Mark Twain's Joan of Arc, and they just, rattled off like 62 stanzas of this great epic play. That sells itself, right? Most people are not aiming to do that. So you don't have to bang the drum too much. You just set the table so that they see it kind of unfolding. You just have to build it in so that people can see it. Okay. All right. So what are the goals? So we're gonna these are the kind of zoomed out goals. We're going to talk about short-term and long-term goals in a minute here. So let's talk about the brand. So defining, enhancing, and communicating your school's brand of why do you exist, right? And this is the subset of your mission, right? Here the definition says the sum of all valuable qualities of a product or service to the consumer, right? So in our case, we're trying to espouse people to truth, beauty, and goodness. We're trying to give them something better to love. We're trying to pass on the faith in a natural way. So we communicate that all the time. Back to school night, every time parents come in, before our spring musical, we get on the microphone before we start, and we lead with a prayer, and we say like how this is a presentation of the children's abilities to perform the arts that God has inspired in them. So always like circling back to like, this is who St. Jerome's. We could just like pull the curtain up, turn the lights on, Shazam, go with it, run with it, right? But you have a captive audience. Speak to them about who you are and what you're doing. It's going to have like a reverberating effect in the enrollment side of things, because they're going to be constantly hearing it every time they're around you, and they're just going to know that's there. Identifying and effectively targeting your school's markets with your marketing mix. So knowing who you serve and knowing what the target aim is for what families that you want to attract to your school. And I know this can seem like the crystal ball component of like, well, I know there's good families out there. I have no clue where they are. I don't know where they exist. But kind of sending out feelers into the pocket to see like, what are your current existing families? What are they really thirsting for? What do they really want? And so surveying them, surveying your staff, surveying people in the community. If you can get people in the community to take a survey. We decided to add on a Montessori program. We had switched to classical, and we had been classical for about 3 years. And we had a traditional pre-K, and it was not filling up. It was, in fact, getting smaller. And we noticed this, and a group from the school, the marketing group in the school, decided we need to, there's tons of young families in this neighborhood. We need to somehow get the message out and see if they're willing to take a survey and find out like, what are they really after? Not that we can meet what their needs are, but we at least need to hear them out, because we see them pushing strollers and there's kids all over the place that are eligible to be here. Why are they not here? And the results from the survey came back overwhelmingly in favor of adding a Montessori program. So we kept that as part of our study. We did some field analysis. We did some executive searching and data and research, and decided to launch one classroom the next year, and then have pretty much added a classroom for the next 5 years to build up to where we are now. But it all started with a survey. Similarly, holding focus groups of mixed groups, some parents, some just parishioners, some with former graduates from the school, some with only their oldest child in the first year within the school, of trying to see, like, what's been your experience? What was your entry point to the school? How have you felt as though you've been welcomed into the community? Do you have an understanding of the culture? Can you articulate that, right? All these components kind of being drawn out from a focus group can go a long way. And then balancing who you invite to the focus group too. I've also seen that go sideways, where you have one person that just owns the whole conversation and kind of steals the thunder from any other like meaningful points being brought up. Okay, optimizing your recruiting process from identified prospects to enrolled students. So this can seem like a marathon for many families and a sprint for others. And I think what has worked here, and I've seen also work in other schools, is you have to stay on the offensive. You have to be the one that's creating the number of touches, if you want to call it, meaning you have to send them multiple reminders. You have to call them personally. You have to text them. You have to remind them the deadlines are coming up. You have to remind them that, this is our first admissions deadline, and if you don't meet this one, this is our most competitive class. It's likely there'll be a wait list. We can't guarantee anything after this date. You just have to be very frank and out front, and don't wait for them to call you. And I would say, especially the families that you think are the highest fit, I'm not saying you call them more and you're like recruiting them in that sense, but I'm saying you need to circle them to make sure you touch base, and don't just say, well, I left 3 messages, they must have lost interest. You need to get an answer and find out, because they might give you really good feedback. They might say, like, you have 5 of these things I really like. You have 2 things that I really need for my family. You don't have them. And then that gives you great food for thought to say, can we add those? Do we need those? Is that who we are? Or will we never offer those things? So it helps you better define and understand who you're serving and where you're going. But you really have to stay out in front of it. It's very laborious. It seems like, the cycle will never end when you have this mentality of you're always looking for more. But wouldn't you rather have a wait list of 100 kids by doing this and sticking to this, as opposed to having like 6 classes that are not even full and you're wondering if you can make payroll, right? Like when the school year starts. So I think having like a tenacious spirit will go a long way to help you just kind of keep all your ducks in a row. And then there's inevitable things that happen over the course of the summer too, where people get reassigned for jobs and they have to leave and nobody was planning on it. And, do you have 3 other families that are waiting on your wait list ready to go? Okay, so here's some elements for a marketing mix. We'll try and go through these quickly. So you need the identity materials. You need elements that communicate the brand. So the name, the logo, the motto, uniform, school colors, letterhead, all these things that are associated to the brand. They end up becoming like touchstones of the brand. Does your uniform dictate who you are? No, you can change your uniform every single year. It's less relevant. You don't want to change your logo or your name every single year, right? Your motto might change over time, but it shouldn't change your mission. Maybe your motto is just a way of living out your mission, and maybe you live a motto for 5 years and you achieve, or you feel like you've mastered or achieved everything there. Fine. But these are just materials at play again, and they may need to be changed or adapted over time, as long as they don't kill or crush your brand. You don't want to abandon all the good things that are associated to your brand. Okay, so collateral, and I like this term collateral because it's expendable things, right? Your brochure, your website, your displays, newsletters, these are all good components, but they're not the entirety of your school. In fact, I really like when people come to our school and have never seen our website. Our website needs a lot of work. And so there's a lot left to be desired from that. And I like it when a school um, maybe has all those things in play, but they're not the forefront of your marketing plan, meaning they're not the number one touchstone face point of your school is through the internet, because there still is a certain amount of staleness or perception or one-sidedness to an argument that comes along with that. So you want to have multiple facets, you want to have all those things, and you need to have them all. You need to have a website, right? And it should be beautiful. Maybe you don't have the resources to get it there today, but you should be working on it, right? So those things, and you need to update those, right? If you have material that exists and the 3 staff members that are listed in your material no longer work at your school, it's time to get new materials. It just is, right? It should be current to that degree. Okay, events. You're going to have events, and you're going to have lots of them. And why I mentioned lots of them, because you cannot assume that any single person that comes to your school is going to have the most flattering experience from that one event. You need to have multiple, and you want them to see you numerous times in action. You want them to see you at your Christmas craft fair and see your teachers, in a pair of jeans and a sweatshirt, and they're selling goods that they make on the side to families, while your administrators are pouring, hot chocolate out for kids, and you want to see them in the classroom, and you want to see the human elements that are all associated to this thing, right? You're doing so much more. I'm going to talk about this later in a slide. Like, you're doing so much more than ABCs and 1, 2, 3s. So keep that in mind as you're trying to sell your school. Invite people to your cultural events at the school. Whatever it is, trying to get out in front and get people to see those things. We do a big Irish Fest at our school. We have some alumni that are very connected in that kind of culture in that world. So they get live bands and dancers, and they have authentic food and drink and all this stuff. And it's always held in March, and our enrollment deadline is in February. And we invite anybody that's applied to come to that. And the last 2 years, I've spent like half my time just talking to new families that have applied to the school at that event. And it's been great because you get lots of minutes with them, like unsolicited. You're just there, and it's like, sometimes it's Q&A, sometimes it's, whatever they want to talk about. But it's a great way for them to see your community like live in action as it's rolling along. Social media presence, this can be good or bad depending on where you are. But I'll mention some of the like great schools as an example, and I'm going to go into this later as well. Reviews and things that people can post comments about your school. So this is a double-edged sword. If you get some great reviews, it can speak really well to your school. You can also get some very damaging ones that can really put a dagger and a dent in things for people that look to that as the original kind of pathway to your school. So what I would recommend is having somebody that reads that on a regular basis, like every 2 weeks, whether it's a staff member, you ask them to log in and look and see what's going on. Maybe your school has a longstanding tradition of great reviews. There's some schools in our area that get pounded and get just destroyed online, and the parents have a very antagonistic approach, or their relationship with the school is wavering, and so they take it to online. And so I only bring this up because this can really hamper some future prospects to your school. Now, there are some ways to get negative posts taken down, and I've found this out on a personal level. I disciplined a student several years ago, and the parents were livid with the outcome. So they shared some words with me, and I said, I'm sorry, this is what we're doing. So they went to a couple different sites and wrote some really mean, nasty reviews. But they weren't about our school. They were about me personally and about the other administrator at the time. and they were kind of like very targeted attacks. So when those things happen, you can actually appeal to the host of the sites, and they'll take them down instantly because they have disclaimers written all across the board that if there's personal attacks against a person, then that's fine. And I said if the family wants to talk about their negative experience with their child and just say the school, I disagree with the school here and there, and here's my experience, fine, so be it. But they were mentioning things about me and my children and things like that. And so thankfully, in less than 24 hours, it was taken down. Most people never even saw it. But that was because I have someone on staff that was reading those things. And they happened to log on the next morning after this took place. And they were like, whoa, somebody jumped on here right away. They're using names and naming names and all this stuff. So, had that stuck around for a long time, who knows what kind of damage it would have caused out there. So the other thing is you can game the system a little bit in when you have a trusted family that loves your school and you love them and you want them to stick around, you can coax them or encourage them to go and write a review. And it really helps your online presence of your reviews and how things are perceived. And you're not asking them to say anything they don't already believe. You're just asking them to put it in writing is all you're doing. So we usually do that a handful of times a year at the beginning and the end. Just saying, would you mind going online? Or they might share something with you that's really beautiful about their experience they had with a teacher or just over the course of the year, or their kid grew so much during this process. Just say, thank you for sharing that with me. Is that something you'd be willing to like put in an online review? I think more parents would like to hear that perspective that you just shared with me. That's great. And I can't put it there for you. So all those things help. Other components, like if you can do some paid advertising, again, if it can be very targeted. We in our early days, we worked with the local Catholic radio station. We met with them and explained who we are and what we're doing, and we actually read some of the educational plan to them, and they were willing to offer some free advertising for us for a limited period. So we created something, and they hosted it for close to 6 months, and it definitely helped to spread the word. I would add with that any public relations media that you can get. So if you know someone that's a journalist, if you are attached to anyone in that field, even the slightest little bit of name recognition that you can get out there for your school, try and catapult that. Ask them if they're willing to write a short piece, something small. It can be picked up by something bigger. If it's well done, then you can use it as part of your marketing package. In our first 5 years of switching over, we were able to be picked up by some bigger publications, the Washington Post and the Wall Street Journal and things like that, and NPR, and it really helped. And we just printed those things out and put them in with the marketing package to say, like, we're not pounding our chest, but we're saying this is a story. It's a story worth being told, and you should read the story and you should find out about it. And if it's a match for you, then come on over. And there's a certain snowball effect that comes with that. I got to write an op-ed this year for USA Today, and like an editor from there called me and said, I have a couple colleagues in journalism, and a couple of them send their kids to your school. They've said so many good things. Would you mind like writing your perspective down? And I was like, that's amazing. Yes. Where do I'll give it to you tomorrow, right? Like, you always take those opportunities, when they come down your path, because you may never get it again, and you can always refer back to those as, look, this was in print, our school was highlighted here, there, and everywhere. If you have direct mail, that can work to a degree, as long as you're using it effectively, and as long as you can gauge the return. Sometimes direct mail, you have no way of knowing if it even got to the people. Same things with SurveyMonkey and Direct Connect and Constant Contact, these things. Unless you can get some sort of measurement stick of how many times it's being opened, you have to ask yourself, how much time are we investing in this? I worked at a school, and the marketing gal, she used this to her advantage greatly, and she was constantly changing like the number of articles, the word count. She was adapting what we were doing based on the number of clicks and hits that it got. And she was finding that the shorter the message, the more likely they were to read it. If it had a color picture of their kids, they were, any color or picture attached to any article, they were going to click on it because they wanted to see, is my kid in that picture, right? These are just natural things, but she was able to kind of study what people were interested in and what they were looking for, and she just used it to her advantage to kind of build what she was already spending time on to begin with. She just was making more educated decisions based on it. Okay, so knowing your demographics and knowing your market that you're serving. I don't know if you can see on the right-hand side of the screen, this is taken from an NCEA study in 2018. And so they surveyed schools and were able to articulate the description around schools and what they were looking for. And those that had a very strong association, what were the attributes associated to that? And then what were the less strong? I wrote it here on the left-hand side in case you can't read the smaller print there, but you can see some commonalities. So it's designed to deepen students' faith, encourages parents to play an active role, offers college prep, right? If you're a K-12, safe learning environment. Those more at the bottom end of their spectrum of least to most descriptive aspects would be providing adequate resources for kids with learning disabilities, cutting edge science and technology instruction, which I thought was interesting with the number of schools and people that they surveyed, how that was far more towards the bottom of the list. And I think mostly because it changes so much. Like you can do that, you can spend your resources there, but you're going to be constantly always spending your resources there. And then a diverse learning environment was lower on the scale for these schools. So this is just a reference point. It may be really helpful for you. It may be not helpful at all. You know, there's other components that you can look to. If you have your own parent satisfaction surveys that you send out each year, you can have them score what you're doing. And if the parents are regularly scoring you with strong associations and all of those things are the highest level of attachment to your mission, then you know you're hitting the mark and you know you're serving the parents that are coming to your school already. And then you just continue to lead into those aspects of marketing to continue to help sell your school, because you know those are the things that matter, right? If they're concerned with some things that are in the bottom rung and they're saying these are things the school's failing at, you'll also know if those are true failures or if those are just parental preferences, right? Sometimes those things don't always match up, but you'll know the reasons why. Okay, so some of the keys to impact to make this work, right? So having a full-time management person, I think, is very beneficial. If you have that, it's terrific. It's mostly unheard of in K-8. Usually all high schools have one person or a team of people. And you can see sometimes it's driven by numbers. Sometimes it's driven by personnel and what's available. Sometimes you just have a person that wants to oversee it in management. I spoke with Rosemary Vanderweed out in Denver, and she said she continues to give nearly every tour and meet with every set of new parents because she wants to know exactly who the people are that are interested in her school. So that's great. She's been able to kind of move her schedule around to make that work. And then you know exactly who you're getting at the top. If you can have one person that manages all the little steps in the process too, or if you have to divide them up, so long as you have a plan to divide those things up and you're sharing things as you're going through the process. We have one person that manages every single phone call, email, inquiry, somebody that stops by and rings the doorbell and they fill out an intake form. All those go directly to one person in our school. Anytime somebody emails me because my email address is on the website and says, I want to know about this, that, or the other thing, 9 times out of 10, I just forward it to our enrollment person and they take over from there. And he can speak to any aspect of the curriculum with great depth and breadth. So I have no hesitation in doing that. And that's also his full-time role. So I want to make sure we're using him to the best of his abilities, right? Having said that, you need a team of people to kind of sit down and look at this. So it may be your admissions person, your entire administrative team, your receptionist, the person who leads your tours, the president of your parent group, your HSA or PSA, whatever it is. it could be large or small, however you want, but I really think you need to meet on a regular basis and walk through the process. Otherwise, you're not valuing the process and you're not serving the families that are looking at your school in the first place. What do I mean by that? I mean that there's lots of documents that need to be submitted. There's lots of questions that need to be answered. There's lots of red flags that need to be caught. There's lots of discussion that needs to be, especially with a student that's applying with documentation for learning disabilities, right? So it's not the 60s where a parent could just pull up in front of the school and hand an administrator a $50 check and say, I'd like to reserve a spot for my kids in the fall. Sounds great. Give us a call in August, right? Like, gone are those days where you could do that. And it's far more complicated. And hopefully your schools are very competitive to provide seats for children. So you want to make sure you have an equitable process. And I think having a weekly meeting does that. So at our school, we have 2 separate teams. We broke it up into 2 groups. One team just meets about Montessori applicants because we have 115 spots, and that's our most competitive entry point into the school. We have a separate team for K through 8. I meet with the K through 8 team as well as our nurse and our admissions guy. And you might say, why the nurse? Well, the nurse goes through all of the medical records and all of the IEPs and all of the evaluations that exist. So she looks only at that. The admissions guy looks at the whole picture, everything all encompassing. And then I look at things like teacher recommendations, report cards, and how do they answer our mission questions, right? Like, why are they choosing our school over another? And then we sit down once a week throughout the entire admissions process from December through the end of March. And we analyze and go through the applications that came in during the last week. And we talk about unanswered questions and we say, oh, this was a huge red flag. Or one time this happened, I watched some families come from another, this was one family came from another school, and they were outside, just outside. They parked in the front of the school outside of my office, and my window happened to be open. And they got out of the car, and 2 siblings got out of the car, and they were punching each other, and they were shouting expletives at each other on the sidewalk in front of our school. And they came for a tour, and I met with our admissions guy afterwards, and I said, so did this family come? And I described the 2 kids. I never ended up meeting them. And he said, yeah, I met with them. It was kind of interesting. I said, yeah, I have a deal breaker, a red flag. It's over day 1. Like, it's not happening. I don't care, who they are, where they're coming from. I already saw the opposite culture of what we're espousing to on the front doorstep before they even step foot in our school. I can tell you that's not going to be a good fit. If they want to go through the process and fill everything out, that's fine. That's on them. But I can tell you, I've already seen enough to know, with my window open, the things that were shouted in front of the school. We're just not going there. So those are things that are discussed at the meeting, right? So that you're all on the same page and talking about mission, philosophy of the school, and if they're a match, like I just said, letting people see the model in action and having as many open houses as allowable. I'm a huge proponent and advocate for this. When I was teaching, I was scared to death at first when we started doing this, because you're thinking, oh my gosh, I'm going to have somebody every single Thursday morning. There's going to be 5 to 10 families walking through my class. I have no clue when they're coming and going. I have no clue how long they're staying. I have no clue if they're going to ask questions in the middle. But the more you do it, the more comfortable you get with it. And what you end up seeing is that you are actually providing the best window into the product, if you want to call it that, of what you're offering to begin with. So, right, like, who buys a car after just seeing it online? Who buys a house after spending 5 minutes in it? Like, usually you walk through the house like 5 or 6 times. You bring in an inspector, you bring your parents, you ask a million questions, right? Like, you really want to know. So why do we not have a similar process with our school, right? We should have the same approach of, don't just let them kick the tires. Open up the hood, take the engine apart, let them see a lot, right? Let them see as much as you're comfortable with them seeing. And it should sell itself if you have that mentality and if you're doing it right. The people that want what you're offering will choose it. And the people that in some cases that have a different expectation. And we've had some families come to the school and say, I thought you were going to be like 10 times more classical than you actually are. And I'd say, okay, fair enough. What do you mean by that? And they could explain it. And with one family in particular, I met with them twice after they decided to leave the school, and they said, we assumed a lot. We came on one tour and we had heard some things and great reputation, this, that, and the other, but we assumed a million things. And so, some of this falls on us because we had elevated all kinds of expectations. And you guys never told us you were going to do that. We just assumed these things were going to happen, right? So, so even with those families that are a good fit for mission, you want to keep them coming back and let them see and let them discern the full process, so they really know in the end. And in that case, we made it through a whole school year, and I had a ton of conversations with them and felt like I was letting them down. And in the end, we found out that no, it started off with false expectations about who we were to begin with, and where we were going and what direction we were heading. And so everything's good in the end. Yes.
One thing about having families in your building a lot, I know when I was first started at Bosco and was picking up, I came to realize that certain teachers, I think is normal, were nervous about being observed like that all the time. And particularly they were afraid that a child would misbehave in front of the visitors. And, I finally realized, okay, you know what, that the parents know, these are parents. They know that children misbehave at times. What they want to see is, what are you going to do about it?
Yes.
Are you going to lose your cool? Are you going to correct it or let it go? Are you going to have a process? I mean, I think one of the best things that happened during a tour one time was I was walking along with the parents, we're talking, and an 8-year-old comes zipping around the corner, marathon style. And then he looked up and he saw me and he put his head down and he walked back because he knew I was going to tell him, go back and walk. And I didn't tell him. And the parents were like, that's awesome. We love this.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. That's great. Yeah. You're exactly right, Colleen. Those things speak for themselves. And it's not anything you stage or set up in advance. But if you're already living those things, and to piggyback on your comment, I found actually the opposite true, that kids are so reluctant to goof off in front of complete strangers. They actually behave better during the tours. When there's a parent, they have no clue who they are. They don't want anything to get back to their own parents, so they tend to button up and do exactly what they're supposed to do. Okay, leverage the classical differences. So I just lifted this directly from the differences between secular education and classical liberal arts that's in the case studies that the ICLE put out a couple of years ago and just updated recently. So these are just simple bullet points if you want to include on your website, on your pamphlets, on your brochures, on, I don't know, maybe it's on a chart somewhere in your school. That helps people see, because they're naturally going to have these kinds of questions that come up. So maybe you have a room where you have new parents come into and you just unpack things and walk through there, and maybe you describe. Maybe this is part of the description, but I think this goes back to the point of saying that classical education is not a product that can be marketed. I would say, on the contrary, it's not something you're trying to sell people. It's a lifetime of education that you're trying to explain. So if you're trying to do it in a short, the 5-minute elevator speech, maybe this helps. Maybe this helps to unpack some of those things to help you see, apples to apples, how does it measure up? Because oftentimes parents just want to know this. How are you different from the 3 schools up the street? You say this, that, and the other thing. I've never seen it before. I don't get it. I don't understand it. What are you really talking about? Maybe this can add some of the language for you. And this is probably on the ICLE website as well, somewhere that you could grab. Okay, grassroots approach. So this is actually a picture of some of our parents. The 2 ladies on the right actually work for the school, and the other's a parent. He's been at the school almost 10 years. And this was at a parent picnic before the school year started. and they all have children in the same class. And I have this up here in a sense to help you see that, like, you know, the rumor mill can be kicked up and stirred up incredibly at these events. Or if you're staying on mission and you have people that are there, not to play defense, but to always keep you grounded, it's really going to help the process go really well. And what I mean by this is this dad has a really keen eye on what we're trying to do. He's been at the school for a long time. He's not Catholic. His family's not Catholic. He loves us and we love him, and it's known and it's pronounced. And he sold the school to so many people just from his own personal experience of bringing non-Catholics in here, the experience that his daughters have had on a very local one-on-one level. And so somebody captured this picture a few years ago, and I just like it speaking to our parent community, like building things up instead of tearing them down. So listservs, I don't know if it's common where you are. If you have an ability to go in them, listservs can be one of two things, or more than that. A rumor mill, a hornet's nest for all the bad things that are taboo that nobody wants to talk about in person, so they bring them up there. Or it can be a platform for good, and it can be a place where you can stretch a lot of things out. So our enrollment marketing guy spends a lot of time reading listservs. He comments very infrequently. He reads them almost every single day. He wants to know what's going on in the like 4 or 5 neighborhoods that surround us. So he signed up, he got permission and access, and he follows the rules, and he doesn't direct market through the listserv. So he never takes like a brochure and just pops it up and says, hey, come to this, right? Because they don't allow for that. And especially since he's a paid employee of the school. But other parents can do that, and he might encourage other parents to do that from time to time for certain things. But more than anything, it gives him an automatic pulse of knowing what's being discussed on a parent level. And parents are amazingly, at least in our area here, amazingly candid and frank and open about what they're discussing. So it'll trickle into some of our meetings of like, wow, that decision to do this really changed the hearts of people. Or I think we really offended some people by doing X, Y, or Z, right? They may not call the school and complain or file a formal complaint, but if they're talking about over there, it matters to them to some degree. So I would just, if you have that existing within your community, you need to have somebody that has a pulse on it. Not that you need to be like defending every little move and action, but you need to know what's being discussed. I mentioned review sites earlier. And then this one is an interesting one. This has come out a lot in the last year due to COVID. Parents who advocate for solutions and not gossip. So we have, a small percentage of parents, but I think this is true of every school that are, I would define them as maybe whistleblowers. They're extremely anxious and they want to let everybody know what they're anxious about. And so in this last year, we've had a handful that have taken to social media and voiced their concerns about the school to social media, and they never brought it to the school's attention. And a couple of very simple, subtle conversations with some other parents at the school. We read it, we didn't like it because it's not directed at us. It's directed to like, oh, everybody comment about how bad they don't like this. Instead of bringing it to the school, we could actually do something about it. So we had parents actually go back onto social media and say, that's an interesting point. Have you brought that up with Danny? Maybe you should. Here's his phone number. Here's his email address, right? And one parent in particular has become like the social media enforcer. And she's defended the school in the sense of sending them back to us. She has never gone in and said, you're wrong. Here's how the school's right. She's never said, you've lost your marbles. You need to get out of here. She's never said those things. She's directly said numerous times, hey, that's an interesting comment or point. You should bring that up with so-and-so at the school. This is the person that directly oversees lost library books. This is the person that oversees the hot lunch program. You should talk directly to them. They can probably fix your problem, right? And if you have those issues, which we have in the last year, that's why I added it here. Having another parent that can just like steer them back to the right department goes a long way. And eventually, in probably our most pronounced person that was doing this is kind of tailed off in the last 2 months. They haven't been posting anything. I think they're probably getting tired of being told where to take their complaints. But problem solved in that regard. Okay, I mentioned this earlier. Marketing a broader approach to overall formation. So including all the things that you do, and don't just list events. So you're building a bridge with parents and show them how you can support them. And it's not just about your academic schedule that you offer. So if you have articles that you want them to read, podcasts, lectures, discussions that you bring in guest speakers, if you're doing book reviews, you need to highlight these things and tell the community about it. And so be outward facing about all of it, and remind them that that's part of what they're getting when they sign up for the school. My sons go to an all-boys high school in town here, and they do a great job on their back to school night, on their opening parent nights, on their open house. Their headmaster says to a whole gym full of parents, look, your son is going to get in trouble. It is called concupiscence. They're going to fall flat on their face, and they're going to be in a whole lot of trouble. Here's how we're going to deal with it. If you like how we deal with it and you're on board with it, choose our school, apply. If you don't like our mentality of how we treat things and how we form and shape and mold and how we try and build them back up, we never catch them from every fall. We guide them through the process, we mentor them, and this is how we help rehabilitate them. If you like this, please apply for our school. If you don't like anything I've shared today, please look for another school. And he's very frank and very open in front, but he's helping them see, you're dropping your kid off here from 8 to 3. There's going to be a time where I have to pick up the phone and say, your child has made a poor decision. Here's what we're doing. Join me in this effort to help rehabilitate them and help them heal and bring them back to where we all want them to go. If you don't like the language I'm using, if you don't like my approach, then you're going to have to choose a different route, right? I've gone to 2 open houses, and he's done it both times, and I've been, duly impressed about the candor and the delivery, and it actually becomes true. And they give their students a long leash. They give them lots of freedom. They have a big campus. They can do lots of things and go around, and far more than we could get away with in a co-ed school. But if you cross the line, your head's on the chopping block. They kick boys out with some regularity for severe things. And so it's known, and he can always go back and say, I laid it out there. And so that's on the front side. On the back side, they have a ton of podcasts. They're all every single week, there's a different staff member giving a talk about the overall formation that we do. And those are marketing components, not to sell the school, but to sell the service that they provide. To say, here's what we're doing. We're going to have a talk every single week on a different aspect of what we're doing. We want you to drink the Kool-Aid with us. You're the reason we're doing this, right? It's not about the money. It's not about fame or recognition or any of these things. We're trying to serve boys, and we need your help. So we need you to know exactly what our aim and our focus is. Okay, so my last few remaining slides here, I'll go quick. I just had as a case study from where we were in 2010. PR disaster, huge debt, $1 million, lots of empty classes, and a huge turnover at the end of a year we went through consultation. So what were our immediate goals that we decided in terms of marketing? So rebrand the school. We needed to redefine ourselves, who we were, where we were going, what we were doing. This meant a new logo, new colors, a new uniform, a new name. We were at a point where what we previously had was dead, and it needed to be resurrected into something brand new. So that was our particular situation. So we had to differentiate our product from what we were previously doing. It had to be raw and real, and it had to be attractive, and it had to be different, and to separate ourselves. We needed some large-scale awareness of our brand. We need to appeal to the marketplace. So actually the first year we switched over to classical, we made a video that was rustic and it was rough, and it probably offended some people in the long run. We were trying to just kind of stick our necks out there and set a tone that we were doing something different. Thankfully, it got a lot of views, and that's really what we were trying to do. So, I don't know if it was provocative, or I don't know if it was too edgy, or what you really want to call it, but it got the desired output, which was trying to appeal to the marketplace with a new brand, with something that was completely different from who we were before, and people knew it. We were in the same building, in the same space, but we were going to cast a net in a completely different direction. So we created all these things in the first year. So the logos, the brochures, just bought a whole bunch of car magnets and we're sticking them on people's cars without even telling them. Just getting it out there, right? Just trying to appeal to the masses, trying to make it beautiful, trying to make it, even use the word radical. Like, what if you could radically renew education, right? You can see it's like very like we're going the complete opposite direction of anything that we were before. It has Latin, right? This is not who we were at all, but it was who we wanted to become. And so we made a direct appeal in that way to kind of paint a story and paint a picture about who we were, where we were headed. And don't you want to get on board with this? Because even when you have something new, it's hard to explain all the new things that are going to happen, right? So you have to use some enthusiasm behind it. Okay, some of the long range goals. So getting into multiple market sectors, so getting into different groups. So using the listservs, using new neighborhoods, new demographics of people that you haven't appealed to before, increasing satisfaction to support high retention. So we surveyed the first like 5 years we did this, we surveyed our parents twice a year. So we wanted to know at the beginning of the year and the end of the year, did we match your expectations? Did we meet your goals? Did we serve you? We started to use social media, which we hadn't been doing before, just to have some sort of presence there. Heightened visibility around classical liberal arts education movement. So we started going to conferences. We started working with consultant groups. We started like reading as much as we could and exposing ourselves to like the movement and saying like, we not only do we not have it all figured out, we have next to nothing figured out. So we need to educate ourselves and really get on board. If we say we're doing this, our action needs to match our desire and we need to follow through. And then just continuing to build up the community and the school and the parish and working with the parish to kind of build a stronghold there and work with those families. So I know our former principal, Mary Pat Donahue, she was not a registered member of our parish. She lives elsewhere, but she came to Sunday Mass here, also oftentimes multiple Sunday Masses, just to stand around after Mass and talk to parents and talk to new parents, talk to existing parents, talk to parents that were homeschooling their kids. She just knew that she had to be here in that part of the community and just sell the school by building relations. And she did that really well. She's a talker, so she was able to do that. Okay, and so our enrollment trend has followed over time. 2012, after our first full year, we had 269. I wasn't able to add in this year and next year, but right now today we're at 445 for next year, so we're trending in the right direction. This is our acceptance rate. So you can see the number of applications has gone up each year. We've been averaging around in between 150 and 200 applications each year. And the numbers have fluctuated a little bit because we've added classes over time. But sometimes, even though we add classes, that's not where all the interest follows, right? So if you open up a new class, Murphy's Law is the interest is always somewhere else, right? You have 50 people on a wait list for kindergarten, but you opened up a new second grade class, right? So that's why the number trends here a little bit differently, but it should follow in descending order. So over time, we reached full enrollment. We're able to balance our budget. There was some debt forgiveness with the diocese, significant debt forgiveness. Now we have a capital improvement program where it's bringing in money, and we have current families contributing to that, as well as key benefactors. And then over time, we've helped to be a part of the process in launching a high school for our students. Next year will be our largest group. We're having 10 of our 8th graders go to the school next year for the high school, including one of my own sons. So great. Okay, so good. So this is the assignment for next month, and it's simple and similar but different in the same way. So there's two options. You're just going to select one of the two. So the first one is just generic. You might want to pick any school that you've heard of or you're interested in, or maybe you pick one that you think is missing the mark on their marketing plan and what they're currently offering. Research the area, the demographics, neighboring parishes. Part of one of the few very fruitful exercises of my master's degree was, I don't remember what the class was for, but we had to go and research every possible measurable input of an area where a school would be. And we had to drive around the neighborhood. We had to look at median home prices. What's the average income? Are they double income? Are they single income? What's the average number of kids per family? I spent gobs of hours researching all this stuff, and I thought, wow, it's actually kind of helpful. Like, most people don't do this. You just go to work and you're just in the building and you're like, well, I hope people show up at the front door for school, right? But if you put in that level of research, and I'm not asking you to do that, I'm just referring to this assignment that I had. I found it very fruitful in the sense of, like, you can actually get a decent raw data measurement on your geographic location. Now, the whole flip side is it doesn't speak to the culture. It doesn't tell you everything that you need to know about the community and the culture, okay? But if you want to just pick a school, I want you to develop some sort of marketing plan for that school and just create short-term and long-term goals to address the issues that you discover in that area, right? You might find a school that's in the next town over. They're at 50% capacity of what they could have. You might say, I'm curious, why is it not working over there? You do your research and you build like a mock plan for how they could kind of fix that. So number two is more personal and could be in a more intricate way, maybe a better use of your time, I don't know. So that's looking at your own school and rewriting the marketing plan based on the known aspects. And why it might be easier to do this is because the cultural differences within the building, things that don't show up on a survey, things that don't show up online in your research. Like you just can't quantify, well, we have a third of our teachers have been here over 25 years. That's really good on one side. It can also be really bad on this other side. So how do we channel our marketing around our staff to paint the best picture of who we are and where we're going and all the rest, right? You also might know the trends of the school and what direction you're heading or not. You might already have like a strategic plan for the school that's in year 2 of 5. So you might already know like what the needs are that need to be met in the next 3 years. So you can kind of cater your plan around that. So it's really up to you guys to kind of decide how you want to slice that up. But just choose one, whichever is to your liking, and just kind of see if you haven't given any time to researching some of the reviews that exist out there, whether it's Google or Great Schools or Rate My Teacher or any of the above. I would recommend just checking out a few of those just to see. You might find out some interesting things about your school. And while I say that, take it with a grain of salt too. You never know if it's a disgruntled formal student that goes on there and never really liked Miss So-and-so's math class and they just now want to stick it to them, right? So you take those things with a grain of salt, but if it's on the internet, it's out there, and so somebody's going to read it and it's going to paint some sort of picture for future parents that are pursuing your school. Okay, any questions about the assignment? Okay, any questions about the presentation or anything that didn't make sense or you believe is total hogwash? I'm okay with hogwash today.
I didn't know what listservs were. I'm sorry. So I was looking up what that is. Okay.
So I'll give a little bit more explanation. So oftentimes a neighborhood or a community within a neighborhood will create a listserv. In the neighborhood that our school is located in, there's actually 2 listservs, one for the moms and one for the dads. That's how they decided to split it up. The dads talk about totally separate things the moms could care less about and vice versa. But and the moms is about 3 times more active than the dads. But when the dads get into an argument, it's deep, it's personal, it's intense, right? So there's different layers. But I'm trying to think. My last neighborhood that I lived in had a very active one. And they would talk about things like parking codes in the neighborhood, when copperhead snakes came out, the teenage high school kids that would try and smoke cigarettes in the back corridors of the neighborhood. And they would talk about the schools and say, anybody sent your kid to this school? What's your experience been? Some people were very candid and frank in a positive way. Some people trashed the schools because they felt the school can't do anything and there's nothing, and they wronged my family, so X, Y, and Z. So, it just depends on if those exist where you are, if they do, and also like how active or what kind of a presence they actually have in your locale, that can play into it.
There are some apps too. There's one like a Nextdoor app, which is basically the same kind of function. You can look around and see if they're active.
Thank you.
Danny, do you remember when is it that you were able to hire an enrollment marketing person? Did that person already exist at your school?
No. So I think we hired him about 2 years after we started classical, and he actually started part-time. So he had another job, and he did this as a 1099 employee. So he was just doing it on the side when he could, and he would do the tours actually whenever he could schedule it with the parents. So at the beginning, so sometimes he was doing tours on Sunday nights at 9 p.m. He just had a key to the school and he would take people in, right? Like you do what you can do based on, your resources and your time. And then slowly over time, we saw that like we need to get more people in here and more regular. So he told his other job, I'm blocking off every Thursday. I have to do it for tours. It's the only way we can do it moving forward. So we did that, and slowly he just started spending more time. And then he's been full-time as a full employee here, I think for 7 years now, as a full paid salaried employee. So we had to kind of like build up to saving up a little bit of money for him and being able to justify the work. And now we have the volume to support it being a full-time job.
The other thing too is that I remember like your first couple of years, you had all this sort of provocative literature, and you were like, shooting the moon as far as like this is what you want to be, and the video. You're talking about the video. The thing is, this is what's worrying me, troubling me, is that I'm saying all these things and I'm rewriting all the curriculum, and I have this curriculum scope, curriculum map, curriculum all the stuff, and then we're giving tours, we're doing all this, our enrollment's going up, and then I have this incredible fear, like, am I going to be able to deliver this product?
Yep.
And like, it's sort of, because, we don't have all of those people. And so I am really worried about going to this next year. I've done like a crazy amount of work, but now my biggest fear is as we're giving tours to all these people, I'm like, did I just dream up this whole thing?
The fear never goes away, Michelle. It's always there. And I can say on a personal level, I was teaching 8th grade one day, and it was not during a scheduled tour time. And I was reading the book Screw Tape Letters with the 8th graders, and I was role playing. So I had taken my tie off and I had it around my head, and I was using some wild accent, and I was saying all this wild, outlandish stuff. And I was in the middle of the classroom, and I didn't know the principal had walked in actually with a parent, but she was a producer at EWTN. And they're standing behind me, and one of the kids is going like this, like pointing, like there's somebody in the room, bozo, like, don't you know what you're doing? Like, so that fear is always going to be there, that, you build everything up, and I could explain things after that as to what was going on. So that was the funny part, but the fear is always going to be there, that you build up this rich, amazing component, and then you walk them in and they don't see all the richness of what you had just talked about. And that fear is always going to be there. And that's just natural law. That's just how it unfolds. who knows if somebody's like, I can only come for a tour at 2:30 on a Friday, and the teachers already pulled their hair out all week, and they're like, it's kindergarten. They're like, we're just doing coloring sheets for the last 30 minutes. Like, just color, sit down, be quiet, and color. And that's all the family saw. Like that has its place on Friday at 2:30, right? So don't use don't lose the platonic view of where you're aiming for just because of that. Like, don't sell yourself short of what you're aiming for, even though not every single staff member can be hitting on all cylinders every single period of every single day. Nobody can, and no school is doing that. So you just have that mindset, and you still shoot for the moon and know that you're going to fall short most of the time.
Mr. Flynn, I have a question. This is Teresa. Regarding a marketing director, obviously this person needs to know the school and it has to be part of who he is. Was it a parent that was interested, or how did he go about even getting that classical feel? Was he trained, or was he already part of the school?
No, he was just well-educated guy. He had worked in marketing himself. He was the editor for the local newspaper. He was on the city council. He had done a lot of different odd jobs. He also, just on the side, works as, this is an interesting thing. He actually takes no money, and he's not licensed as a realtor, but he's able to gain access to homes to help people get located in the neighborhood because he's trying to find Catholic families to join the community. And if you're a realtor, you cannot ask people their religion, and you cannot deliberately try and place people in certain spots. So he acts as like a go-between to help people. And he'd been doing that for years because that was just his own personal interest of trying to build up his own neighborhood with solid Catholic families. So all that to say, he did not have any kids in the school. When we became classical, he put his kids in the school right away. He had actually started a homeschool co-op out of his basement. So he was already a passionate guy about education, well educated. He had studied in Jesuit schools and grown up and seen a variety of different things. He was in the seminary for a little while. So he was exposed to a lot of good things, but he was not classically trained. He's learned a lot through the process, and also as a parent. And then he asks a lot of questions, and he does a lot of research on his own. So he quickly caught on to the wave really fast, without having to just only be a parent, I guess.
Great, thank you.
All right. Okay, great. Well, I won't take anyone else's time. I appreciate you guys making time today to talk about this. And it's been great to chat with so many of you, early mornings, afternoons, and everything in between. We still have a couple more people to touch base with, but it's been great to hear about what's going on in your schools and all the great work that you guys are doing. So keep it up, and I'll see you in 2 weeks.